Basically, not so long time ago, we woke up in the middle of a storm, which started with an application to the leniency program of Barclays last year, that basically opened up a discussion about the integrity of financial benchmarks and how financial benchmarks can be used for explicit collusion in this case. There was an issue concerning whether these are individual practices or practices that are formalized within the governance of a bank, but this is not necessary, this is besides the point. If banks agree to manipulate prices, whatever is coming from a small trader or a big trader, that's not the point. It's the point that the governance of the bank was not sufficiently sound to make these benchmarks resilient. So the cartel basically broke up, and we entered, in a new sphere of discussion, investigations, opening up of new formal investigation in other sectors, not just in financial markets, but also in commodities markets. And so the whole problem unfolds, the knock-on effects, and we are today discussing one of the key responses to this kind of market failures. And actually the point here is that why do we need benchmarks? Benchmarks are essential. That has to be done, has to be said. Just because they substitute what markets cannot deliver. So pricing of a product by itself. So in that case, you need to have someone which is collecting information and is ensuring that that specific asset class gets priced at the right value. So that's one of the issues that comes up in this discussion is about the role of administrator in dealing with what we call opportunistic behaviors. So the fact that monitoring costs are very high for two reasons. First, because some of these benchmarks get indirectly paid by the contribution of submitters. So some benchmarks have a high value just because they have high number of submissions that make the benchmarks very valuable. So you have an intrinsic conflict of interest in the administration of benchmarks that brings you to potential opportunistic behaviors. So it's not monitoring sufficiently the quality of how the price is scored. The second element is given by the pricing power of the submitters. We know that in some spaces there are very few submitters, and these very few submitters have high share of them. They also have pricing power on the benchmark, on the administrators, or their capacity to monitor, because if one of them drops out, the value of the benchmark disappears. So these are two failures that certainly came out with the scandal, LIBOR scandals, with the investigation that we see across asset classes, and that's one point that the Commission tried to assess. Of course, here in these failures there are different kind of level of intensity of the failure, which is given by the kind of inputs that feeds into benchmark prices. There are benchmarks that are built on market data that are legally disclosed, this information that is verifiable, and so this is, I would say, more transparent process. There are benchmarks that are based on transactions. In this case, you have not necessarily transactions that are disclosed legally, but are transactions that are only disclosed to the administrator under specific legal conditions. And in this case, the intensity of the market failures increases to be, I would say, at its peak when we talk about judgments, when we talk about situations in which the market data, transaction data is so low and so poor that administrators have to exercise judgment. In that case, the role of judgment and discretion is very highly subject to failure. So in this case, the Commission, and what is a common, I would say, theme in this discussion is that the failure in administrating benchmarks is done by the monitoring costs. So the ability of influencing the monitoring power of the administrator. So it is mainly a supervisory issue rather than a regulatory issue. So what the Commission tries to do, and I think correctly in most of what has been proposed, is that we will set a minimum set of standards, a minimum set of transparency requirements to make sure that the administrators can have the right incentives to monitor, to keep monitoring their own the submissions, and therefore also the way the benchmarks are formed in the different kind of nuances that I've just described. So the Commission proposal basically should be also read in conjunction to other kind of initiatives that the Commission has done. The Market Abuse Directive review, the REMIT, in which they try indeed to increase the supervisory powers that are in the hands of regulators and harmonize them at European level. However, of course, the proposal has to strike the balance between what are the supervisory powers and what are regulatory tools. So in this kind of proposal, of course, there are pretty strong regulatory tools which go well beyond supervisory powers. Some of them I was discussing before, the fact that there will be unauthorized benchmarks. So which means basically you will need to control whether the users are using an unauthorized benchmark. So this goes well beyond, I would say, the control over the administrator, because it controls basically how the users use the benchmark. This is one of the important elements. There are other aspects concerning, of course, the transparency methodology of the input of data. There are the code of conduct for contributors, which are now legally binding, which certainly is a good way to go, because you will need to increase competition among administrators to the top, a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom in terms of requirements and ability to supervise the contributors. However, of course, making them legally binding are going to increase the barriers to new entry, because of course at the same time you will need to keep competition by keeping the barriers to entry. If you increase and if you make these regulatory requirements legally binding, at least for code of conduct, can create certainly barriers to entry. There is also an interesting regime, which is the one for critical benchmarks. First of all, there are questions that I will ask the panelists concerning, of course, whether this threshold is set right, or how this threshold has been set up by the Commission. But certainly there is this compelling contribution by some key contributors in some situations that can create distortion to market. So there are, of course, as I said, the Commission is trying to strike the balance between regulatory supervisory tools, but one of the key issues remains, of course, the ability to increase, to make, I would say, situation like where failures are very high, like judgments, discretion, the administrator exercises discretion into the finalization of the benchmark, of the final value. It's to make this judgment meaningful, verifiable, and then accountable. So the timing of the proposal is quite unclear. There is, of course, the willingness of the Parliament to have it approved before elections, but apparently this will be very difficult. But of course, the timeline, the schedule set by the Parliament is very tight, so there might be something coming out before election, but of course the Council most likely will not be ready by then. So the proposal will shift to the next Commission and the next Parliament.